Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, welcome. My name is Heather, and on this channel we like to walk a very fine line between a shopping addicted makeup monster and a responsible adult with a makeup hobby. Now, I really enjoy eyeshadow singles, duochromes, multichromes, blush, highlight, lip gloss, basically everything except pressed glitter. And today we're going to be doing a quick palette ranking of the palettes that I was trying out in the month of October. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, stick with me, we're getting into it right now. And in this particular ranking, I only have 6 palettes, which is not bad. It's just been a month, let me tell you. In terms of what I'm wearing on my eyes right now, that is the Siren Sunset from Lunar Beauty. That is not included in this particular ranking this month because I have only tried it out. This is my 3rd time wearing it. So I want to give it a little bit more of a try before I make a final kind of decision about it. But my first impressions video slash like at least for now review will be up shortly. So coming in at number 6 is the Star Wars Colourpop palette. Now I've only done 2 looks with this palette, but I used both of the Super Shock shadows, which were the ones that interested me the most when I was doing these looks, and they were so frustrating to use. They look super beautiful in the pan, but when you actually try to go use them, they just look like muddy and gray. Like the blue and the red doesn't stand out enough to make it look nice. So I got kind of frustrated because I felt like these should be nicer. Like when you swirl them, like it's all great that it looks pretty in the pan, whatever, but they should also look pretty on the eyes, and they just don't. They look like muddy and gray. So that made me kind of sad, and for that reason I put it down at the bottom. Alright, coming in at number 5 is the Petals on Point palette from Colourpop. And this one, I mean, obviously, it's a really soft, light colored palette, right? But I thought that this shade would at least be like mid to deep in terms of its tone so that it would pick up nicely and you could kind of get a nice shadow in the outer corner. But this does not pull this dark on your actual lids. This looks very soft and light, and so I just didn't feel like there was enough depth in this palette to make it make sense. Like you didn't need this shade, this shade, this shade, this shade. You could have had one like really deep dark shade, and I guess that's what this was supposed to be, but it missed the mark. So for me, I put this one down lower, even though it's like cute packaging and everything, because it otherwise is just a really, really, really light palette, and I need more depth for this one. Coming in at number 4 is Melt Gemini, and I had carried this over from my September palette review because I had used it, I think, either once or twice by the time I had originally thought about ranking it. And then I was like, no, let me give myself a little bit more time to use this palette, but I don't find myself coming back to it. So I think when I use this palette, I'm either using kind of this half or this half, and once I've kind of done those looks, then I'm kind of done, you know what I'm saying? So this one is kind of 1/2 dimensional for me, and so it went a little bit lower just for that reason. Also, warm tones are not usually my super fave, and of course half this palette is like super warm. These, you could argue, are also warm tones, but they're at least olivey, so that gives me a little bit more appeal for my personal taste in makeup. Coming in at number 3 is the Ace Beaute Smoky Rose palette. Now I've used this like 3 or 4 times, I think, but I keep going back to the same shades. So there are several shades in this palette that don't look used at all, and it's because they're not. When I saw this palette online originally, it was a sneak peek for, I think, a BoxyCharm like month, and I was like, wow, that is such a pretty palette. I definitely want that palette. And then I went online to their website, and it was like $35-40 or something. I was like, never mind. And then it ended up in the Ipsy sale for $8.99, and there was free shipping. So I was like, okay, for less than $10, I'm willing to try the palette and see if it's like a nice palette. But the shades that interested me the most were basically like this little cluster right here. So those are the shades that I used. Every time I did my makeup, every time I opened this palette, I kept getting sucked back into those shades. And the eye look comes out really pretty. The metallics in here are like the Glam Light metallics. They're really buttery and smooth with lots of sparkle. Like I like that formula a lot, but the rest of the color story, like these 2 columns entirely, I don't care about that at all. Like I probably would have been happier with that than I am with that, but that's just me and my personal taste. So because I liked the formula so much, it came up a little bit higher in the ranking, but because I sort of gravitate to the same one note look, it slipped down a little bit. Now here's the part that really threw me for a loop, because the last two palettes that we have, one is high-end and one is drugstore, and the drugstore palette beat out the high-end palette. So coming in at number 2 is Natasha Denona Xenon. I know. And I really like this palette a lot. Like, I freaking like this palette a lot. I love this kind of metallic sparkly shade because it has this violet to blue duochrome quality to it. It doesn't pick up very well on my lights because my lights are so bright, but in person you can kind of catch that. And in the video I put up, you can kind of see it in the swatches that I did. The finishes of the metallics and the sparkly shades in this palette are what sell me on this palette. The mattes, obviously it's super one note. In general, the palette is pretty one note, but I still think that that one note is very pretty and very multi-dimensional with like sparkles and stuff like that. So this one rose up a little bit higher because I thought the quality of this one in general was so nice. And then last but not least is the NYX Ultimate Vintage Jean Baby palette. Now this one beat out the Natasha palette because it's more versatile. That's why I picked this one to go number 1. I really like this palette, you guys. Like, there's no reason that this palette is this good. It's just shocking to me. The metallics in here are really buttery and sparkly, which I really like. This shade up here is a metallic and it has these kind of like orangey, peachy, fuchsia, and blue shimmers in it. So when you put it on the lid, it looks very sparkly and interesting, which I really appreciate. I think that's like a sort of a surprise feature that you wouldn't necessarily see in any of the swatches or any of the online sort of digitized versions of this palette. I really like this sort of taupey gunmetal gray shade here that's a metallic, and then the blue and the silver play so nicely together. I like that they gave us a couple different undertones for the blues, and then you have this really deep navy, almost charcoal gray, so that if you're going more with like the lighter browns and stuff, you still have something that's nice and deep to smoke out in the outer corner without having everything needing to pull blue. So I feel like this is a little bit more versatile than the Xenon palette, which is definitely more like you're gonna get a gray sparkly look no matter what you do. This one you can kind of go blue, you can kind of go browns, you can kind of mix them both together. You've got some like rosy things in here. So I felt like there was more versatility to this palette, which is why it came up all the way to number 1. And with that said, that is everything for this video. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe before you go, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!